Hi everyone, Paul here with An Ear for Men, and I am back. The cross-country move has been the biggest pain in the ass that I've been through since having a wife some 20 years ago. I'm happy to report that both of those dark chapters are now closed, and I'm mostly settled into my new home. For today's talk, I'm going to conclude the 4 stages of male well-being with part 2, which covers stages 3 and 4. As some of you will remember, in part 1, I covered stages 1 and 2. And by the way, I really recommend you follow the link in the low bar and listen to part 1 of this talk if you haven't already. And even if you have, you might want to listen to it again. That said, in the first part of this series, we talked about the fundamental need to work through family of origin issues, followed by a handful of red pills to put yourself on the path to general well-being. And now's a good time to reiterate some of that talk. The family issues work is important because dysfunctional family rules force each family member to deny their own individual identity and to instead play a needed role for the family. This is a slow suffocation of the true self because being yourself with your own reality, your own needs and desires, not only doesn't serve a dysfunctional family agenda, being yourself actually poses a threat to the awkward and artificial balance that keeps dysfunctional families together. Healthy, functioning human beings with high levels of self-respect can't thrive in a family that operates on denial and delusion, in families where abuse and psychological maladies are the rule. The healthy individual in that setting is an unwitting but antagonistic reminder of all that is wrong with the family and the fact that none of it is being addressed. When children in these families demonstrate healthy behavior, like calling out the dysfunction or rebelling against the abuse, the dysfunctional family, in a rare moment of unity, will rise up together to crush the dissent, to force the truth back under the covers, and will demonize the child in the process. To be clear, when I'm talking about dysfunctional families, I'm talking about nearly all of them because in our culture, familial dysfunction is the norm. Some families are worse than others, some much worse. Some are so bad that the only sensible long-term solution is estrangement. There's a term for that. A common acronym for the family of origin is FOO, or FOO. When it becomes necessary to make a clean break from the family of origin in order to secure and maintain good mental health, we use the term DFOO. This is not a recommended first option, nor will most people find it necessary to DFOO, but it is important to note that it is a possible option when nothing else will work. And whether someone elects to DFOO or not, the critical steps of grief and forgiveness still apply. As a footnote here, after reading the comments on the first talk, I want to make a point of distinguishing between forgiving and forgetting. Some commenters felt like I was urging men to give their abusive families a pass. Far from it. The point of forgiveness is not for the benefit of the abuser. It is for the abused. Forgiving someone doesn't mean you have to make nice with them. It doesn't mean you have to forget what they did or act like it didn't happen. In fact, there's no particular reason I can think of why you even need to tell your abuser that they're forgiven. It's none of their business. The point of the forgiveness is that resentment is like a very large, very heavy suitcase with no handles. Lugging it around all your life takes energy from you. It results in stress for you. It causes discomfort to you. Lifelong resentment toward the abuser is a natural consequence of many forms of abuse. It is also how abuse victims pick up where their abusers left off and continue the pain, conflict, and angst without any further help from their abuser. When we talk about abuse having lifelong effects, we are sometimes describing the lingering wound of chronic resentment that burdens the victim and does not affect the abuser at all. Forgiveness is the most direct path to dropping the suitcase and being free of the abuser's influence once and for all. Forgiveness is how you take an abuser's power away. As I said in part 1, the path to that kind of forgiveness is grief. The common denominator of all abusers is that they take things. They take away the safety of childhood. They rob their victims of self-respect. They steal their dignity and even, if allowed, abscond with the victim's future. When we learn to see abuse in the context of what has been taken from us, it opens the door to grieve that loss and to move past it, to accept it, and to rebuild on our own terms as adults. Rebuilding is a lot easier when you're not lugging around all the baggage that the abuser saddled you with. So, in a nutshell, the goal of working through family issues is to grieve losses and move on with as little baggage as possible. Now, the second stage I referred to in part 1 was taking the red pill. I don't need such a detailed recap of that one, so I'll keep it simple. If you are not highly conscious of gynocentrism and prepared to rebel against it wherever it undermines your well-being, then your well-being will always be easily undermined. I seldom deal in absolutes, but this is one where I take that license. Keep in mind that gynocentrism, like a dysfunctional family system, places you in a role, one every bit as destructive and repressive of your true identity as any family ever created. The role is default enabler of all things female, the great unpaid bodyguard and protector, not just from the wolf at the door or the thug on the street corner, but from the everyday discomforts of real life that you are expected to tolerate with your mouth shut. The role is the patsy, the clown, the cuckold, the emotional pincushion, the designated boogeyman, and the hapless dupe. I'm not trying to be harsh here, but if you cannot look at the lives of average men and see how society corners them into playing these parts, then I can only suggest that listening to any more of this talk won't do you any good. If you are still brainwashed to the point that you think mindless sacrifice is a virtue, that women are sugar and spice and you aspire to be their savior on a stallion, then none of the material here will make any sense at all in your life. Also know that I'm not pointing the finger at women. To be fully blunt and honest, too many men reside in a sanctuary of denial about the role of women in all of this. They blame women for all their ills in the same way a burglary victim who refused to secure his property places sole blame on the burglar. Sure, the burglar is at fault, and so are women in many cases. But resting smugly on that is a fool's solution. It is reminiscent of feminists who wail powerlessly when anyone suggests rape prevention because, as they say, all we have to do is teach men not to rape. They take no responsibility for themselves and they demonize anyone who suggests they should. That sort of thinking has no place in my work. Connecting with women is fine in my book. But if that bond is predicated on unconscious chivalry, on blind adherence to the mandates of elevating her happiness above all else in life, if happy wife, happy life is your mantra, then you are taping a sign that says, "Kick me" on your back, and you have no one to blame for it but yourself. I'd put my last dollar on the idea that the life expectancy of your mental health is dangerously short. Perhaps there was a time when blind gynocentrism worked for men. I don't really think so, but I'll leave it to others to argue that one way or another. What I know now is that in this culture, in these times, with these women, gynocentrism is toxic. Blind, unconscious gynocentrism is cancer. Let your worldview be curative, not carcinogenic. And with that, I've concluded the recap of part 1 of the 4 stages of male well-being, and so now I want to go on to finishing this 2-part talk. Stage 3 is simple enough on the surface. Financial comfort. There's no doubt about it. If you want to maintain an appreciable level of well-being, you have to have your money in order. Now note, though, that I said financial comfort, not financial success, not financial freedom, and I didn't even say financial independence. First, all of those things are just fine, but they also mean something different to each person. I chose financial comfort because what I'm really talking about here is as simple as not living in a state of deprivation. For reference in this part of the talk, I cite Abraham Maslow, link in the low bar. Maslow was an industrial psychologist in the 1940s who constructed a ladder or pyramid representing the needs that motivate human beings to realize their full potential, or self-actualization. As it relates to my work here, self-actualization is virtually interchangeable with the term well-being for men. The most basic needs, or what Maslow called deficiency needs, form the foundation. Food, water, shelter, rest, and on a higher plane, social belonging and personal accomplishments are pretty much basic, and they're the platform from which we can shoot for self-actualization, or the full realization of our human potential. That translates into guaranteed well-being. It's important to note that big money is not a necessity for self-actualization. In fact, depending on the sacrifices made to make big money, it may be an impediment to that goal. Personally, I could live just fine in a studio apartment with a serviceable kitchen, a decent internet connection, and real-world contact with my friends. I'm fortunate to enjoy more than just those basics, but my willingness to enjoy life on that level, doing what I love to do, allows me to see all the extras as gravy. The important thing is that I don't live at a state of deprivation, which is made much easier by the fact that the list of things that I would feel deprived to do without is very, very short. And probably the most important part of creating this personal posture in my life is my work on stage 2, rejecting gynocentrism. It's amazing what refusing to yoke yourself to the role of designated everything for a woman does for your sense of general satisfaction and ultimately your well-being as a man. I'm using myself as an example here, knowing that there are almost countless ways to skin this particular cat. Some men want more materially for themselves. They would not be satisfied with driving my 2004 Chevy or with living without many of the things that don't really matter to me. That's fine. If living without some or all of the trappings of a financially successful life would make a man feel deprived, it's not for me to be bothered about it or to judge it. It just means that he will have to work harder, perhaps at things he does not love, in order to satisfy his desires. That doesn't mean that he can't achieve well-being as a man or self-actualization. Lots of affluent men self-actualize. The trick here is to find the balance between what it takes to meet deficiency needs and what that effort costs in terms of freedom and the opportunity to give time to the things you love. Certainly, there's no magic bullet to make that happen. It can be challenging for anyone. But I will wager you, in my decidedly unscientific opinion, that men who break free from the shackles of family dysfunction, who refuse to repeat the sick family traditions, and who ingest enough red pills to immunize them from the worst of gynocentric pressures, are also men who have the highest chances at durable well-being and self-actualization. Interestingly, Maslow speculated that only 1 in 100 men would self-actualize, that the rest would spend their lives vacillating back and forth between deficiency needs and a higher plane, that 99 out of 100 just couldn't get it. I think he was right. I've been saying for a long time that the red pill will always be a minority community. Too many men, and women for that matter, are buried too deep in the programming. They are stuck in the box and will never get out. They are trapped in a fairy tale that usually goes up in flames, and when they finally rise from the ashes, they do it all over again. 1 in 100 sounds about right. Luckily, the only thing that stands between you and being the 1 out of 100 is you. Which brings me to the 4th and final stage of male well-being, a healthy, well-honed contempt for social convention, especially where it concerns men. As I noted earlier, simply pointing the finger at women and demonizing them in the same way that feminists demonize men is a tempting, even satisfying, albeit short-sighted and ultimately ineffective option. There's not a single flaw in women, no outrageous sense of entitlement, no childish expectation of privilege, no interminably immature attitude toward life that is not sanctioned lock, stock, and barrel by 99 out of 100 men around you. Even more so, the insane demands that you do insane things like trade your legs for a medal, breathe coal dust to make a living, stand by like a rat waiting to drown while others are loaded into lifeboats, recite lies or at least nod in agreement to things like the fake wage gap, rape culture, and the illusion of a glass ceiling are all products of human culture. They are gendered problems inasmuch as men bear the brunt of all of it, but they are a product of a now dysfunctional human society. All of these complete insanities are simply the artifacts of a culture performing precisely the same way as a sick, dysfunctional family. It's crazy, unconscious men and crazy, unconscious women working together. The objective is to put you in a box, or to be more accurate, a role. We've already established the importance in this talk of challenging and rejecting family dysfunction and of doing the same with the toxic dictates of gynocentrism. What I am suggesting now is that the icing on the cake is to do the same with the entire world around you. Question the motives of every institution. Examine the roots of every social convention, again, especially where it concerns men. Personally, I've been examining social conventions regarding men most of my adult life. I have never found a single one that was not geared to use men up and spit them out dead. Marriage, chivalry, patriotism, religion, family codes, traditionalism, and pretty much any adjectives you can put in front of the word man. All of it can and should be rejected until it is analyzed consciously and adopted by your free will with your well-being in mind. If you do that, you might be surprised at how little of all this stuff you find to be of any use at all. Society, the world around you, has wired itself over tens of thousands of years to turn your life into a utility. For women, for other men, for Wall Street, for the assorted gods, and for what we so conveniently call the greater good. We have developed codes and expectations, both overt and subtle, that are largely enforced by the most effective way to enslave men ever devised: shame. That shame is inflicted through the use of adjectives about men which we are conditioned to fear more than hell from the time we're old enough to use language. We're driven onto battlefields with it, into coal mines, into shitty marriages to petulant, demanding women, into soul-killing jobs, and into groveling before ideological thugs, and into complete and total silence about all of it. And we are programmed to believe that playing this sick game makes us good men. It is no wonder we kill ourselves at 4 times the rate of women who are spared most of this nonsense. In that sense, our struggle for well-being is also a struggle for survival in a world that demands our disposability. All you have to do is reject about 3 million years of psychobiology and everything you've learned your whole life from most everyone you've ever trusted. It's a piece of cake for 1 in 100 men. It's up to you whether you want to be one of them. And that concludes this talk on the well-being of men. I hope you've enjoyed and perhaps have gotten something useful in your own life from it. I'm going to close this by saying that it feels good to be back producing again. This is the way that I achieve my well-being, and I have missed banging on these keys. Now that I've moved and largely settled into the new digs, I will be able to continue this without such long breaks between talks. If you want to support that effort, please visit the Patreon page linked in the low bar, or if you prefer, you can make either a one-time donation or subscribe directly through PayPal at the other link provided. Your comments, likes, shares, and subs are also very much appreciated. Till then, we'll see you next time.